Ladies and gentlemen, we're now beginning our preliminary 2024 budget meeting of the Haverford Township Board of Commissioners. It's November 20th, 2023, a couple of minutes after 7. Tonight's agenda is a limited agenda strictly to the consideration of and the preliminary adoption of year 2024 budget and accompanying ordinances that go along with that. I will ask Mr. Berman to call the roll.
Commissioner Gondek?
Present.
Commissioner Forresty-Grupp?
Here.
Commissioner McCluskey?
Here.
Commissioner Cavender is absent this evening. Commissioner Quinn?
Here.
Commissioner Hart?
Here.
Commissioner Wexler?
Here.
Commissioner Trombetta?
Here.
Commissioner Holmes?
Here. Chief, will you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Which it stands, indivisible.
Thank you. We have the next item on our agenda is for agenda items only. It is the citizens output portion of our meeting. I now invite any member of the public who would like to come up and say anything about the 2024 preliminary budget. As I always do, I will start to my left. Anybody here on the left side of the audience who would like to be heard tonight on the 2024 budget? Seeing no takers, I turn to the right. Is there anybody in the right of the audience who would like to speak on tonight's agenda? Hearing none, we will close citizens' input and now move to the next item on the agenda, which is our budget hearing and preliminary adoption of year 2024 budget. I know that our township manager, as well as our head of our finance commissioner committee, will be speaking on this issue. I am no longer the head of finance, so there is a possibility that we'll get out of this meeting before the third quarter of the Eagles game. So, without much more, person can hope.
I think we're going to read the motion first, right?
Yes, would somebody,
Motion to adopt an ordinance, a preliminary general fund, sewer fund, and capital fund budget, including all taxes, fees, service charges, and other revenue sources provided within all funds for 2024.
so we have a motion and a second. The agenda indicates the presentation of the budget by you, Mr. Berman, but remind me, do we vote on this first?
No.
No. Okay. Mr. Berman, would you like to present the preliminary budget for our consideration?
I sure will. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Berman. I'm the Township Manager for Haverford Township. Tonight, I will present the proposed operating budget for 2024 and a 4-year capital improvement plan for the board's consideration. The proposed budget is the culmination of a great deal of work and communication led by Finance Director and Assistant Township Manager Amy Cuthbertson. The board will review the proposed budget this evening, ask questions, seek clarification from township staff, make any adjustments the board feels may be necessary, and then adopt the preliminary budget for 2024. The entire budget, including any adjustments, will be published on the township's website following this meeting, hopefully at some point tomorrow. A hearing will take place on December 11th here in this room at 7 p.m., where interested citizens may express their views on the preliminary budget. At the conclusion of that hearing, the board will be asked to adopt the final budget with any amendments the board considers to be advisable at that time. So the budget isn't just a bunch of numbers I say every year. The process begins in August with discussions among department heads, volunteer boards and commissions, and of course township commissioners. The proposed budget represents our interpretation of the goals and objectives of this board. Let me take a moment to thank Assistant Township Manager and Finance Director Amy Cuthbertson, who led the entire budget process. I'd also like to thank Commissioner McCluskey, who provided valuable guidance and consistency as Chair of the Finance Committee. I will also rely on the two of you to provide clarification where it may be needed this evening. So this year's 53.1 proposed general fund budget provides resources for all municipal services other than sanitary sewer. All facets of municipal government, including administration, tax collection, police services, fire services, emergency medical services, tree services, code enforcement, zoning compliance, sanitation, highway maintenance, curbside leaf removal, streetlights, traffic signals, snow removal, Park maintenance, recreation programming, stadium operations, and debt service are all included within the general fund. The ARPA fund accounts for federal funding received through the American Rescue Plan Act. These funds are reserved for specific purposes as established in the American Rescue Plan Act, and we are required to keep these funds separate from all other funds. Disbursements from the ARPA fund will vary from year to year as we complete projects until those funds are fully expended, or until December 31st, 2026, whichever comes first. The Capital Projects Fund accounts for non-ARPA capital projects. However, like the ARPA fund, disbursements from this fund will ebb and flow as we complete various projects. So you'll note that the capital and ARPA funds total $44 million, and the general fund and sewer funds are $58 million. So we have a very large budget and a lot to accomplish this year. Focusing specifically on the general fund in particular, we note a 7% increase, budget to budget, year over year. So there's two significant drivers of that increase. First, the planned transfer out to capital for the library project is $1 million. And we also, this year, see a spike in the minimum municipal obligation to the pension plans. And I lost my page. So just so we're all sort of on the same page, the minimum municipal obligation, or the MMO, represents the minimum amount we are required to deposit into the pension plans in a given year. This year, marked 2023, that is, marked an official valuation year for our uniform and non-uniform defined benefit pension plans. This actuarial valuation forms the basis of our MMO. We know there's been a lot of volatility in the investment market, and there have also been some updated mortality tables and a number of retirements. And so our MMO this year increased by $1.5 million. So if you exclude those two categories of expense, the general fund budget increased by a modest 1.5% year over year. So the general fund budget overview, we continue providing the same level of service, balancing safety, quality of life, and efficiency with community needs and expectations. We also will satisfy our contractual obligations with the civilian and the police collective bargaining agreements. We'll proactively continue to address the increased MMO responsibilities, and we will continue addressing some pay equity issues that were identified by a study that we completed just a year ago, I believe. So we do have some future concerns about a select few of our revenue lines, particularly those relating to the real estate market. Also, in 2024, we're going to have a shutdown of the stadium for replacement of the chillers. And that follows a replacement of the cooling tower, by the way, which is supposed to happen by the end of this year. The proposed budget includes a 2.58% increase in the township's real estate tax millage, following no increase in 2021, no increase in 2022, and a modest 1.8% increase in 2023. So the proposed budget as presented includes no changes to the sewer rent, which is $4.65 per 1,000 gallons of water used, and no change to the trash and recycling fee, which is currently $283 per residential unit. So a common theme over the past 3 budget cycles has been the township's awareness of the economic conditions facing our residents. After enduring what had once seemed to be isolated challenges, the county-wide reassessment, and then the global pandemic, we're now faced with soaring inflation and a volatile investment market, which is creating challenges for our pension plans. Through it all, Haverford Township has come out on the other end of those initial challenges on sound financial footing. Our reserves stayed healthy, our credit rating remained top-notch, and our cash position remained strong. But the current financial environment challenges all of us. High inflationary pricing costs naturally affect a service-oriented business, such as local government. Fiscal year 2024 will also bring the challenge of increased labor costs due to our collective bargaining agreement commitments, additional debt service, and higher pension costs. Last year, we took a dual approach in balancing our budget and combined a nominal property tax increase with a $1.5 million planned use of reserves. While our reserve levels demonstrate our sound financial footing, we cannot continuously rely on reserves to balance our operating budget. However, the anticipated increase to reserves at the end of 2023 does allow us to use the same approach as in 2023, and we are proposing to utilize $820,000 of reserves to temper the 2024 property tax increase, which is obviously well below the current rate of inflation. So we'll talk about the property tax structure and what makes up your property taxes. There are three entities that rely on property taxes here in Haverford Township. It's Delaware County, it's the Haverford Township School District, and it's this organization, Haverford Township. Each taxing authority, the county, the school district, and the township, determines their own property tax rate, or millage. The combination of assessed value and millage determines how much tax each property owner will pay to each taxing authority. The chart that you see on the screen simply shows that the school district captures the lion's share of property taxes here in the township, with the county and the township collecting far less than the school district. And this model is pretty common throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So the proposed general fund budget provides resources, as I said earlier, for all municipal operations. Overall, our 2024 general fund revenue budget reflects a 7% increase over 2022. Couple of notes. We see a 115% increase in investment earnings. This is the silver lining to the multiple federal fund increases, and it has an impact on our savings rates, obviously. We have also aggressively, to the extent permitted by law, invested in CDs and other commercial paper, creating overperformance of investment earnings. So we're currently earning about 5 to 5.5% on much of our liquid deposits, and as high as 5.9% on some of our longer holdings, when we were accustomed over the last 10 plus years to very, very minimal interest earnings. You'll also see a 13% increase in other income. Just a note, so the library reimburses us for participating in our group term life insurance, our long-term disability insurance, and our pension and health plans. As its personnel count has risen over the years, the amount reimbursed to us has also increased. Additionally, the reimbursements we receive under miscellaneous items has been trending higher in recent years, and we're talking about the cell tower real estate tax payments, manufacturers' rebates, and things of that nature. 59% increase in interfund transfers and other. In fiscal year 24, we proposed transfers of about $1.2 million from investment earnings on ARPA monies to fund increased MMO responsibilities. $80,000 from ARPA funds to help offset revenue losses from the planned stadium shutdown that I mentioned earlier, and $200,000 from ARPA funds for other one-time personnel costs. As I said earlier, the trash fee is scheduled to remain the same for 2024. We have we pay $87 a ton for the tipping fees for Delaware County. And we will recoup 79.4% of related cost of collection. Services, as you know, are 2 times weekly trash collection, weekly brush collection, weekly recycling collection, 2 township-sponsored e-waste events, the e-waste bins in the parking lot for smaller items, 2 township-sponsored shredding events. We have a compost incentive program, a glass recycling bin that'll be here in the coming weeks, and we also have Sharps medicine drop-offs here at the township building. So going back to general fund expenditures, cost drivers in the general fund, we talked about the police and civilian collective bargaining agreements. We have an 8% increase in property and casualty insurance premiums. We have an 11% increase in workers' compensation coverage. We have that huge increase in the MMO, the pension funding, of 30%. We have an 18% decrease in gasoline and diesel costs. That's based on the cost of fuel. Discussion on general fund expenditures. So in the general fund on the chart that you, in the general fund, we include increases in Act 172 volunteer firefighter tax credits. We're proposing to go from 20% to 50% to show appreciation and help recruit and retain our volunteer firefighters. We've proposed a 3% increase in operational contributions for all 5 volunteer fire companies, Discover Haverford, and for the Haverford Township Free Library. We're seeing a 4% increase in our self-funded prescription, vision, and dental employee benefits. On this chart, I'm showing the first several categories, department expenditures, and you see that we have a 18% decrease in IT costs, and that's largely due to personnel changes and retirements and new hires within the department. We have a 10% increase in township facilities, which is largely due to the insurance here that I mentioned just briefly a moment ago, and we saw an increase of approximately, and we also added a part-time employee for building maintenance. You see a 9% increase in police, largely due to the addition of 1 new uniformed police officer, but also with the related benefits and the increased MMO requirements, since all uniformed and most civilian employees participate in the defined benefit plan. We have an 11% increase in fire protection, which is the 3% operational contribution increase that I mentioned a moment ago, combined with the Act 172 property tax credit that we're proposing to take from 20% to 50%. Next page, the item that jumps out at us is the 52% increase in auxiliary costs. That's a combination of the 3% operational increase to the library and $1 million planned transfer to capital projects for the contribution towards the construction costs of the library. We also see a 13% increase in parks and recreation, and that's largely monies related to an increased part-time wages and a potential retirement payout in 2024, as well as some pay equity adjustments within that department. And this is the last section of the page, and as the numbers are not as significant as the last couple of slides. The chart that you're looking at now shows the general fund expense categories, and obviously public safety, police, fire, code enforcement are capturing the majority of our expenditures, and then public works follows closely behind that, with the other categories trailing behind that. So speaking of debt service, Township, as of December 23, we have $59.7 million in outstanding general obligation debt, with the borrowing base capacity for non-electoral debt of $115 million. So we have about 52% outstanding. Current budget includes no new borrowings for 2024. And I'll remind the board that Haverford Township is currently rated AAA by Moody's Investor Services, which means we get the favorable bond rates if we do issue debt. And currently, 9.8%, or just about 10% of our general fund budget goes to pay debt service. We'll move into the ARPA fund now, where we have, again, I mentioned earlier, ARPA funds are the American Rescue Plan Act funds, and we are required to keep them separate from all of our other funds. And these funds, we received a $19.8 million, as you'll recall. These funds may be used for to address the public health emergency from the pandemic, the negative economic impacts from the pandemic, preliminary payouts to essential workers during the pandemic, water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure improvements, and general government needs except pension and debt payments. The emphasis in the regulations for ARPA funds is on providing services to disproportionately disadvantaged communities. These funds must be allocated by the end of 2024, and they must be spent in full by the end of 2026. That's the current guidance from the Treasury. Summary of the ARPA funds currently, well, as of November 13th, we had actually spent just about $4 million of ARPA funds on the various initiatives that we have undertaken so far. We've obligated an additional $4 million. We have about $11.5 million to be obligated by the end of '24, and in total, we have $16 million just about to be spent by the end of '26. Here we have some of the proposed ARPA projects in the 2024 budget document. We have continued park improvements, which includes some funds for the development of the Brookline Park and the Darby Creek Trail extension. We have Darby Road Streetscapes Phase 3 and some tree plantings along Westchester Pike. We have some mental health initiatives and the senior open houses that we've been doing all along. We have township-wide, we've included funding for a township-wide parking study and bike racks in the business districts. We have some business revitalization and modernization, matching grant programs that we will introduce soon. We are planning to do the Safe Streets for All studies that the board approved last regular meeting, stormwater management initiatives and sanitary sewer improvements, police in-car cameras and body camera replacement. We have some large pieces of heavy equipment for public works and some equipment for the police department. And we have plans to pave the public works facility, which is in dire need of resurfacing. Moving on to the sewer fund. So the largest sources of revenues within the sewer fund are obviously our sewer fees. These are based on actual water flows supplied by Aqua, Pennsylvania. We did see a negative trend of about 1.7% reduction in water use over the last 5 years, and a year-over-year, a one-year reduction of about 1.3%. The reduced water usage does lead to reduced revenues because that is the basis of our sewer rate. So the revenues will be lower without a rate increase. What kind of things are we paying for out of the sewer fund? We have our sewer crew personnel. We have charges for treatment from Upper Darby Township and also the city of Philadelphia. And we have the Radnor Haverford Marple Sewer Authority, which is based on water flow out of the township, and there are minimal increases in those costs over 2023. We don't have any specific large-scale capital needs that would be paid for in '24 out of this fund. We're going to be using the ARPA fund for that purpose. So again, the proposed budget in the sewer fund includes no change to the sewer fee. It's $4.65 per 1,000 gallons of water. We do have some I&I, that's inflow and infiltration of clear water into the system, and that inflates the amount of water that must be conveyed and treated by the plants. We should have a discussion at some point in the coming year or two about a potential new rate structure, possibly by EDU fees, rather than based on the water usage, which we currently do. And we have fund balance in the sewer fund, which is restricted just for that fund. We can't take that money and use it someplace else. So we do not plan to use sewer reserves in the 2024 proposed budget. There are circumstances where it might be appropriate, but this year is not one of those. Capital Projects Fund. So again, it's another fund. It's separate from our general fund, separate from our sewer operations, separate from the ARPA fund. And it holds the monies for capital projects, which includes some of our historic properties. So disbursements in this fund will vary from year to year, depending on how much work we are accomplishing in a given year. Source of revenue is bond proceeds, sale of township assets, one-time revenues, and interfund transfers. and there are no new borrowings proposed for 2024. Some of the capital projects on our list for 24 include the electric vehicle charging station at the CREC, some welcome to Haverford signage at some of the major entryways to the township. We have some solar panel construction planned for the township, some of the township facilities, stadium improvements, including the electric ice resurfacer. That's a Zamboni, correct? Cooling tower and chiller replacement, as I mentioned earlier, and renovations to the locker rooms. We do continue to fund our historic properties with some capital improvements. There are some interior improvements to the CREC, which we have planned. Continuation of the Pensy Trail project and the Mill and Carricong Park and Ride facility that, the Mill and Carricong is about to be underway. The Pensy Trail has already started, as we all know. We would like to purchase a pole barn for Public Works to provide some much-needed space over there, and various Public Works equipment, technology improvements, including a new human resource information system. So wrapping this up, keeping in mind we have the civilian collective bargaining agreement ends on December 31st, 2025, so that's something we'll have to face in the coming years. We have a lot of high-profile projects, such as the library renovation, the stadium projects that we've been talking about, the Pensy Trail, the Darby Creek Trail, Vermont and Glendale. We have a lot of work going on in the township, or that will be going on in the coming years. We have continued use of ARPA monies in accordance with the allowable spending rules and in line with the deadlines that were established by the Treasury. And so the next steps, as the board knows, would be to adjust for corrections and or update revenue projections with final consideration and adoption on December 11th, 2023. And in closing, I again have to thank Amy Cuthbertson for putting this thing together, along with the department heads who worked carefully and closely with Amy to put together a budget that is clear, hopefully, and concise for the board's consideration. That's all I have, Mr. Holmes.
Mr. President, if I could.
Yes, well, first, thank you, Mr. Berman. Yes, Mr. McCloskey.
I just wanted to, I'm sure some of my colleagues are going to have questions, and we're going to have further discussion about the budget. But I did just want to, from the outset, thank Ms. Cuthbertson and Mr. Berman for their tireless work in putting this together. I think Dave sort of undersold some of the challenges that they faced in the budget process this year. And a lot of the same challenges that many of us are facing in society today with increased inflation and other challenges to our financial pocketbooks. Specifically with us in the township, we have the pension obligations that Mr. Berman mentioned. And that's something that we're happy to have for all of our employees, but it is something that we have to take into account for our budget. And to have a modest of 2.58 while also utilizing some of our reserves, I think tries to balance what is appropriate in terms of our spending, but also assures that in 2024 we can continue to offer the services that our residents have come to expect from the township in all areas, whether it be from the police, from our public works, codes, and just every Parks and Rec, everybody is in the township. So certainly express my appreciation and thanks to Mr. Berman and Ms. Cuthbertson for really doing great work with this budget, and many comments from our colleagues.
Thank you, Commissioner McCloskey, also for your work and the work of your committee. Do any of my colleagues have any questions or comments about this budget?
Yes, I just got one quick one about the lights. The lights that I see under the Park and Rec thing. Where are those lights going to go for the fields?
I believe they are planned for McDonald Field off of Glendale Road, and then to redo the existing lights that are at the Grange Field up at the reserve.
Okay.
So I talked to Brian Barrett about that, and that's where the.
Thank you. And thank you all for your work on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Quinn. Any other commissioners have any questions or questions or comments or additions or deletions to this preliminary budget?
Just briefly, just so people have an understanding, first off, I'll join in thanking all the hard work that has been put into this by Ms. Cuthbertson, by Mr. Berman, and by by Kevin and Commissioner McCluskey, and all the other people who've worked on this. I mean, it is a tremendous amount of work that goes into it every single year, and I think it's important that the public understand that while we are looking at a small tax increase of 2.58%, that this board takes any kind of tax increase very seriously. That there have been numerous meetings and reviews that we've all conducted and conversations that we've all had with various members of the township, the department heads, and so on. And that when we look at it, we're looking at what can we do to make sure that the township remains as attractive and a great place to live and work as we can. And unfortunately, with inflation and with costs going up across the board, that impacts us no differently than it impacts everyone else. And sometimes we have to make some hard decisions, but they're decisions that we're making based on the belief that what we're doing is what's going to maintain the attractiveness of the township, which is going to make it a desirable place to live and raise your families and move to, which should, in the end, help everyone's real estate values, amongst other things. But also just stress, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, a huge chunk of our budget is labor, that we are basically a huge service provider. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, our labor accounts for upwards of 65 to 75% of our overall budget. Is that correct?
Operating, yes, sir.
Okay. So, I mean, just starting off, every year labor goes up and hence our budget goes up. So, I think that while I don't ever, I'm pro I think that the fact that we're able to pull off just a 2.58% is something to be somewhat proud about. So thank you guys for your hard work on this. The only other thing I would just point out, and again, just for the public's knowledge, you had indicated on the expenditure side, one of the line items, the auxiliary, that had a huge jump of 52%. And you had indicated that was a transfer to other funds. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you do the budget, you don't just do next year's budget, but you start to do some projections for future years. And in future years, that huge jump is not there. This is truly a one-time increase. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is the planned contribution from the general fund for the library. It's a one-time planned contribution. So the future years, you won't see that $1 million. Unless something else happens.
Well, we like you said, we've got a lot going on, so let's get some stuff off of our plate first. But that's all I have. Thank you very much again for all of your hard work.
Thank you, Commissioner Gondik. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Is there a trend in the percentage of our budget that's dependent on property taxes? That over the last 4 or 5 years, are we seeing any recognition, or we're seeing revenue come from other places?
I don't think so. Property taxes always hovered around 52, 53, low 50s, representing that much of our budget. The interest, of course, was a welcome silver lining, as we called it, this year. I think there are a couple areas we just want to be mindful of, like, for instance, the cell tower revenues, the rentals from the cell towers. We sold one of the we sold the only cell tower that was truly ours this year, so that revenue has gone away. There was another thing with the cable franchise fees that at one point was bringing in over $1 million. With the change of the public to streaming services, which aren't covered under franchise fees, we see that revenue going down too. So I think we want to get ahead of a couple things before it becomes an issue, but those two areas in particular, we should still see continue to go down. On the flip side, if I just may, our business taxes are really performing well. With higher prices, unfortunately paid by the consumer, with our business taxes being a gross receipts tax, we do get a little bit of the fruits of that. So we had a very good year. Still want to see how the rest of the year goes in with the business taxes, but so far we're very pleased.
Approximately what percentage of our budget comes from the business tax?
Business taxes are about 9% including transfer tax, so if you take that out, it's probably about 5%.
Thank you.
Actually, one last question, just to put this in context for anyone who's watching this or listening to this. The 2.58%, do we know approximately what that means per household?
Yes, it's about $35 to $38, depending on if you like to look at medians or average property values, but somewhere between 34 and 39 to be safe.
So $34 to $39 per year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just to go back to what Jerry was talking about, and Ms. Cuthbertson about our business tax. I mean, that's why us as a board, we're always trying to invest and support our local businesses, because any revenue that is generated by the local business tax is something that we can use within our budget to help offset any planned real estate tax issues that we have. And so I think it's incumbent on us to continue to try to do that. And then in that light, I would remind everyone that Shop Small Business is this Saturday, so support your local Havertown businesses.
Thank you all. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Berman, you could call the roll.
Commissioner Gondik.
Yes.
Commissioner Forresty Grubb.
Yes.
Commissioner McCluskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Quinn.
Yes.
Commissioner Hart.
Yes.
Commissioner Wexler.
Yes.
Commissioner Trombetta.
Yes.
Commissioner Holmes.
Yes. Next item on our agenda is the next item on our agenda is ordinance number P15, 2023. That's the sewer rental charge, first reading.
Motion to adopt the first reading of ordinance P15, 2023, fixing the annual sewer rental or charge for each property connected to the sewer to $4.65 per 1,000 gallons of water consumed or used by said property.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I would, to the extent that the audience hearing the agenda thinks that the number refers to fixing the annual sewer rental to $4.65. It is at $4.65, and that is the rate that we have been operating at for at least the last year. How many years have we been at $4.65? 2 years. So that is not an increase, but is the previous rate. Any questions or comments on this vote? Hearing none, Mr. Berman?
Commissioner Gondik.
Yes.
Commissioner Forresty Grubb.
Yes.
Commissioner McCluskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Quinn.
Yes.
Commissioner Hart.
Yes.
Commissioner Wexler.
Yes.
Commissioner Trombetta.
Yes.
Commissioner Holmes.
Yes. Next item on our agenda is ordinance number P16 of 2023, the trash fee.
Motion to adopt the first reading of ordinance number P16, 2023, fixing the Township of Haverford trash fee at $283 per year.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Again, this is fixing the rate at the same rate as last year. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Hearing none, Mr. Berman?
Commissioner Gondik.
Yes.
Commissioner Forresty Grubb.
Yes.
Commissioner McCluskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Quinn.
Yes.
Commissioner Hart.
Yes.
Commissioner Wexler.
Yes.
Commissioner Trombetta.
Yes.
Commissioner Holmes.
Yes. That concludes our agenda items for the evening. As I indicated before, this is a special purpose meeting just for one agenda item. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Don't move.
We are adjourned.